being a Forbes 30 under 30 is a big deal.
Or is it?
I've spent weeks putting together a list of every 30 under 30 founder, and I've found some shady stuff, starting with the fact that it's not 30 a year. Try 600 people. Since 2011, 7,800 people have been featured in Forbes' list, and as you probably already know, some of them have aged like milk.
Look, I should have been on top of this.
The stunning fall from grace
to the Forbes 30 under 30 list.
30 under 30, totally gamed, totally bullshit.
Actually a marketing growth engine.
The internet seems to agree that this list is all bullshit, and I've collected some of people's thoughts about it in that board, which I'm going to show you through the video. But I have been wondering, what does the data say? Is Forbes actually that bad at selecting people?
Forbes 30 under 30 is really about, and it's not just about celebrating changemakers in every industry.
Are they buying their way here? Is this a pool of new criminal stories? And what does being on the list do for you as a founder? By the way, the first thing I should clarify is I am not a Forbes 30 under 30. I'm already 35, so it's not like I'm gonna make the list anymore. But many years ago, I was elected as a 40 under 40 in a rather small Costa Rican newspaper that's probably just ripping off Forbes' idea, but more on that later. What is this list supposed to be promoting, and how do people get on it?
Forbes lists are a curse.
30 people who will be in jail in 30 months.
Is trash.
Here to clarify, most of these 30 under 30 spots are purchased.
The official position is that in order to be one of the not 30, but 600 featured people on the list every year, you have to ideally be nominated by someone or nominate yourself, which, let's face it, is probably kind of lame. By the way, we're referring to the US and Canada lists, not including Forbes Asia, Europe, and a bunch of others out there. This also means that there are probably close to 1,000 Forbes 30 under 30 every year. Also, our video focuses mostly on founders, most of whom come from the consumer and enterprise tech industries, which curiously are no longer categories, seemingly starting this year. Applications for next year's class are collected through the year with a deadline of December 31st. And you have to complete this long ass form, which I'm gonna ask my editing team to do a time lapse on and to collect the questions for you here. I'm sorry, guys. The official position is that a team of writers, editors, and external judges review the candidates. Some of those judges have included Mark Cuban and Taylor Swift, who finds a blank space and writes your name on it. You of course have to be 29 or younger. You can't be featured twice unless your first feature was in a local licensee list like Forbes France. They discourage spamming, so submitting multiple nominations doesn't help. After the submission deadline is done, they go silent and they don't tell anyone who's going to be featured until results are finally announced. Now, in the case of founders, key factors to be featured include funding, revenue, investors, social impact, scale, stage, inventiveness of the company, and potential. Finalists undergo some background checks, not only for criminal records, but also for status of their current companies, which might include tax returns to prove revenue. The most important disclaimer to make is that you can't pay to be on the list. But can you?
The Forbes list
I wouldn't
is
want my name being
fake.
sullied by having
Forbes
it associated with
lists are
Forbes.
a curse.
A lot of people apply and pay money to be on that list.
The official position is no. And I genuinely think Forbes would be in a lot of trouble if they were caught suddenly charging people to be on the 30 under 30 list. Like, I'd feel like that would leak out quickly. But let's not be naive enough to think that money isn't involved in here. Just like Fortune 500 or Inc. 5000, Forbes 30 under 30 brand is crucial to the company. It serves as an annual reminder of their brand in order to remain relevant, especially among young people. And there's a mutual benefit in the credibility of a young person being featured and Forbes being able to access their audience. Think about this idea of featuring Kendall Jenner. How much of her audience was exposed to the Forbes brand because they picked her? How many of them hadn't even heard of Forbes before? And of course, there's a 30 under 30 summit, which actually happens in a couple of days, with tickets going for around $600. And maybe more critically, how much of your relevance through the selection phase comes from the money and influence that the people who sponsor you have? But hold that thought, because even if no money gets thrown around, that isn't even the biggest problem with Forbes' list.
30 people who will be in jail in 30 months.
Forbes is trash.
The list has produced a fair share of embarrassing stories. Maybe let's start, Martin Shkreli. Pharma bro, famous for raising the price of a life-saving drug from $13 to $750, but that's not the reason why he went to jail.
Are you gonna change the price?
No.
There's of course Charlie Javis, founder of a company called Frank. that got acquired by JP Morgan for $175 million based on customer growth data that she had made up, because she faked about 4 million customer records out of the 4.3 million customer record database that JP Morgan thought that was buying. How could we forget about SBF, Sam Bankman-Fried, and his girlfriend Carolyn Ellison, both serving time right now. Also serving time, Elizabeth Holmes, though curiously, she wasn't officially a 30 under 30, she was just a headliner of one of the 30 under 30 summits. Tomato, tomato. And of course, Nate Paul, Cody Wilson, James O'Keefe, Steph Curry, Lucas Duplin, Flory Marquez, and a fair share of others. Now, those names I found easy. Those are major public fiascos and probably the most crucial examples of flaws in Forbes' list. So much so that Forbes themselves had to publish their own Hall of Shame. But there are others, 7,790 extra Forbes 30 under 30 honorees. And what is up with them? So as I told you, we worked for weeks on putting this list together. We looked at 1,367 people who were featured as founders or executives, and then we filtered out only the 762 honorees that were actual founders or co-founders in their respective companies. And then here's a breakdown of the 30 under 30 categories where each of these founders came from. Now, most of those companies were able to snatch a .com domain for their products, but chances are that they had deep pockets or they had to add a few extra characters to their company names. And if you're thinking of settling on a long and complicated .com domain, maybe think again, because there's something much better out there that's clean and slick. A .tech domain. A .tech domain immediately signals that you're a tech startup and you can get just the name that you need without any hyphens or extra numbers or letters. In fact, startups building on a .tech domain have raised over $5 billion in funding. I've also found some really cool startups who are already making waves in the tech world, like Nothing.tech or Aurora.tech or Jitai.tech. So it's pretty straightforward. If you're building a tech startup, it should be in a .tech domain. Visit go.tech/Slidebean today and check if your .tech domain is available. This link can also get you a sweet 50% discount on the first year, so don't wait. Okay, so 32 are dead. In 26 cases, at least one of the founders featured has left the company for various reasons. And last but not least, 8 of these 7 founders have had legal issues tied to their businesses, or they've been sued. SBF, Caroline, Frank, and some of those other Hall of Shamers are, of course, in that group. However, the remaining companies have either exited, 88, or are still alive. That's a rather astonishing 89% success rate for Forbes.
The majority of Forbes 30 under 30 face jail time.
Now, these companies come from many different categories. Some are venture-backed and some aren't, but let's imagine that Forbes was a VC and had invested in all of these companies. Their success rate would have been significantly higher than the current VC metrics. Social impact is by far the most successful category. Every founder we looked at is still with the company, and the company is still around. Healthcare, education, and enterprise tech all have 90+% success rates, with finance being the most iffy category, because founders are more likely to leave their companies or to become felons, because 6 of the 8 founders with legal issues come from the finance category. What's the problem, and who is to blame? Can we blame Forbes for not doing due diligence on its honorees? I genuinely think hardly. The Elizabeth Holmes and the FBFs of the world fooled smarter and wealthier people than Forbes journalists. On a measly 1.08% of the people we analyzed, I think it's a small fraction of criminals slipping through the cracks. Now, don't get me wrong, that's still 1 in 100. They should be able to catch this stuff, but when SBF was featured, his company was rocking and there was no evidence that there was foul play behind that.
The guy you see next to me is the most generous billionaire in the world.
Now, another problem, maybe a bigger problem, is what the tag does to people, what the label does to people, for good or worse. Because this name tag, 30 under 30, gives people a new excuse to spam us on LinkedIn or to sell us on what they do. Like this article that talks about how to get on the list in order to sell you one-on-one consulting services to get on the list. But this is simply bound to happen if what the list is doing is honoring hustle culture. Like, hustle culture is what's made LinkedIn an unbearable social media platform, and I generally think that that's what's made people hate the 30 under 30 list a little bit. They just never shut up about it, will they? Like, they'll put it on their email signatures and their bios and on everything. Which brings me to this. I told you I was featured by a very small, mostly insignificant publication in my home country of Costa Rica as a 40 under 40 founder or featuree. And I was that guy. I would leverage this tagline all the time, obviously only to people in Costa Rica, because otherwise nobody would get what it was. But maybe because I'm a douchebag too, but mostly because that was the only validation that I had at the time. Like, I was running a startup that was trying to raise money and ended up failing. I was broke. I needed to hustle to get back up and pay the debt that I picked from failing that first company, and that recognition helped. For a 20-year-old college dropout with a short and empty resume, that stuff makes a difference. It's credibility. Now, the problem is that credibility is a dangerous weapon in the wrong hands. That exact credibility is what creates SBFs and Elizabeth Holmes. That credibility is one that hundreds of entrepreneurs I talk to every month who are not from a startup hub, who don't have rich parents or strong networks, are desperate to get, but just can't access. It's just very easy to pick the nasty examples or the criminals or the Nepo kids, but there are really cool stories of self-made founders that Forbes brings light to. And I think that that's great. And even if it was through a ripoff of the idea, it helped me get here. Now, the fact that privileged people get an edge on this list is not Forbes' fault. That's just capitalism 101. And if you don't like it, Reddit, Twitter, YouTube comments, that's a whole different conversation, but don't take it up with them, us. You get what I mean. Now, if you want a real weaponizing credibility story, you should look at our video about the founder of WeWork. We'll see you next week.